A janitor storms a boardroom, slamming down papers that claim her empire. Betrayal, racism, and murder unravel in a corporate conspiracy. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell to catch our latest thrilling stories. The boardroom's glass doors shattered the morning's calm as Ruth, her janitor's uniform stained with years of toil, barreled through, her boots pounding the marble floor like war drums. Briefcases hit the ground, coffee cups tipped over, and the executive's smug chatter choked into silence as she hurled a thick stack of documents onto the mahogany table, the thud echoing like a judge's gavel. "Laugh now," she said, her voice a low growl, eyes blazing with 15 years of swallowed fury. CEO Richard Hale, lounging in his tailored suit, smirked, unfazed. "What's this? Ruth lost your broom." Laughter erupted, sharp and cruel, from the suited men around the table, but Ruth stood unmoved, her calloused hands steady. She shoved the papers forward, the top sheet screaming in bold last will and testament of Marcus Hale. "Read it," she commanded, her tone slicing through the mockery. Hale's smirk twitched, his fingers snatching the document. His eyes darted across the page, widening as they hit the truth. Ruth owned 51% of Hale Financial Group. The room exploded, shouts, curses, a glass pitcher crashing to the floor, shards skittering across the marble. "This is a joke," Hale roared, slamming his fist so hard the table quaked. "You're a cleaner." Ruth stepped closer, her shadow falling over him, her 5-foot frame somehow towering. "I'm Marcus Hale's daughter, and your new boss." The air turned to ice. Marcus Hale, the company's founder, dead 16 years, his legacy buried under whispers of poison. The executives' faces drained, some clutching their chairs, others exchanging frantic glances. Ruth had spent a decade and a half mopping their floors, scrubbing their toilets, listening to their late-night deals hissed in empty offices. She'd been invisible, a ghost in blue coveralls, but she'd seen it all: the bribes, the backstabs, the bigotry. Now she held their sins in her hands. "You're finished, Richard," she said, pulling a USB drive from her pocket and tossing it onto the table with a clatter. "Play it." The IT tech, a nervous kid named Tim, fumbled with the projector, his hands shaking under Hale's glare. The screen flickered, and a grainy video roared to life. Hale in his corner office, tie loosened, laughing with 2 executives, Collins and Marlowe, about slashing the dead weight and siphoning millions into Cayman accounts. "Those lowlifes won't know what hit them." Hale's voice sneered on the tape. The boardroom fell deathly quiet. The projectors hummed the only sound. Hale's face went gray, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. "You bugged my office," he hissed, voice trembling with rage. Ruth's lips curved, a predator's smile. "Didn't need to. You talk too loud when you think no one's listening." She leaned in, her breath hot. 15 years I cleaned your filth. Now I clean house." The video looped, Hale's damning words ringing. Collins, red-faced, lunged for the USB, his chair screeching, but Ruth was lightning, snatching it back and pointing at the security guard by the door. "Move, and you're done," she snapped. Collins froze, sweat dripping onto his tie. The guard, a burly man named Carl, shifted, his hand on his radio, eyes locked on Ruth. She tipped him off weeks ago, promising him justice for his own years of being stepped on. The room was a tinderbox, every glance a spark. Hale stood, his chair scraping, veins pulsing in his neck. "You won't get away with this. Ruth, you're nobody." He jabbed a finger at Carl, barking, "Get her out," but Carl didn't budge, his jaw tight, loyalty now Ruth's. Ruth tilted her head, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "They don't answer to you anymore." She pulled a second USB from her pocket, holding it up like a loaded gun. "This one's worse. Want it on the screen." The projector whirred, waiting. Hale's fists clenched, his breath ragged. The other executives squirmed, Marlowe muttering to Collins, their whispers frantic. Ruth's gaze swept the room, pinning each man to his seat. "You thought I was nothing," she said, her voice rising, sharp as a blade. "You mocked me, spat on me, walked over me like dirt. But I saw everything. Your offshore accounts, your racist jokes in the break room, your plans to fire anyone who didn't kiss your rings." She tapped the will, her father's signature a ghost at the bottom. "This company is mine, and I'm taking it back." The video shifted, a new clip crackling through the speakers, Hale's voice again, this time spitting racial slurs about the useless staff he planned to axe, including Ruth's friend, Lena, a single mother who'd begged to keep her job. The boardroom seemed to shrink, the truth choking the air. Ruth's heart thundered, but her face was granite. She'd spent nights piecing this together, sneaking into server rooms, taping conversations through air vents, her hands raw from scrubbing floors by day and digging for truth by night. Hale staggered back, his bravado crumbling. "You can't prove anything," he shouted, but his voice cracked. Ruth stepped forward, closing the gap, her eyes boring into his. "I've got more emails, bank records, witnesses." She nodded at Tim, who'd gone pale but stayed at the projector. "Keep it running." Another clip played Collins bribing a regulator, his voice smug. The executives were trapped, their empire unraveling with every frame. Marlowe bolted for the door, but Carl blocked him, radio crackling as he called for backup. "Sit down," Carl growled, and Marlowe slunk back, defeated. Ruth stood at the table's head, the will under her hand, her father's dream alive in her veins. She'd waited 15 years, biding her time, polishing floors while plotting this reckoning. The projector glowed, the next clip ready to burn them all. This was just the start. The projector's glow cast jagged shadows across the boardroom, each frame of the damning video slicing deeper into the executive's composure. Richard Hale's voice boomed from the speakers, bragging about siphoning millions into offshore accounts while laughing about cleaning out the trash the staff he planned to fire. The screen froze on his smirk, and Ruth, standing at the head of the table, snapped her fingers. "Keep it rolling, Tim," she said, her voice steady as steel. "The IT tech." Tim nodded, sweat beading on his brow, and clicked to the next clip. The room gasped as Hale's voice returned, this time spewing racial slurs about employees like Lena, a single mother whose pleas for her job had been mocked. The executives squirmed, their tailored suits no shield against the truth. Hale lurched forward, his face purple with rage. "Turn it off," he bellowed, lunging for the projector. But Carl, the security guard, was faster, grabbing Hale's arm and twisting it back, pinning him against the table with a thud. "Stay put." Carl growled, his loyalty to Ruth ironclad through years of being ignored by these men. The other executives erupted, Collins shouting, "This is blackmail," while Marlowe slammed his fist on the table, sending pens skittering. Ruth didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her janitor's boots squeaking on the marble, and tossed a second USB onto the table. "Blackmail," she said, her voice cutting like a blade. "This is justice. I've got years of your secrets, every deal, every slur, every dollar you stole." She pointed at the screen, "And it's all backed up where you can't touch it." Collins, his face slick with sweat, tried to stand, but Ruth's glare pinned him down. "Sit," she snapped. "You're not running this show anymore." The video shifted, showing Collins bribing a regulator in a dimly lit parking garage, his voice smug as he handed over a briefcase stuffed with cash. The boardroom felt like a cage, the air thick with panic. Marlowe, desperate, turned to Hale. "Do something, Richard." But Hale was frozen, his eyes darting to the door as if escape was an option. Ruth caught his glance and smiled, cold and sharp. "No way out," she said. "I've been watching you for 15 years, every late-night meeting, every whispered plan in the men's room. You thought I was just a mop." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "I was your shadow." The door burst open, and Lena, the fired receptionist, stormed in, her eyes red but fierce. Ruth had called her that morning, promising a reckoning. "Tell them," Ruth said, nodding. Lena squared her shoulders, facing the executives. "You laughed when I begged for my job," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "Hale called me disposable, said people like me were better off gone." The executive shifted, avoiding her gaze. Lena pointed at the screen. "That video, I heard those conversations." Ruth wasn't alone. The revelation hit like a shockwave. Ruth had built a network: janitors, guards, clerks, all invisible to these men, all feeding her scraps of truth over years. Hale's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. "You're lying," he spat, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Ruth pulled a recorder from her pocket. Clicking it on, Hale's voice filled the room again, this time from a bathroom stall, boasting about rigging a shareholder vote. The executives' faces crumbled, their empire unraveling. Collins, desperate, tried a new tack. "Ruth, we can talk," he said, forcing a smile. "Name your price." Ruth laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think I want your money? I own this company." She tapped the will on the table, her father's signature a silent witness. "I'm here to burn your world down." The projector clicked to another clip: Marlowe shredding documents in a back office, muttering about covering our tracks. Marlowe bolted upright, his chair crashing to the floor. "That's edited," he shouted. But Tim shook his head, whispering, "It's raw footage." Ruth had spent nights in the server room, copying drives while the building slept, her hands trembling, but her resolve unbreakable. The door swung open again, and two more employees entered: Jose, a maintenance worker, and Aisha, a mailroom clerk, both clutching folders. "We've got more," Jose said, tossing bank records onto the table. Aisha added emails, printed proof of Hale's offshore transfers. The executives were cornered, their lies exposed by the very people they'd dismissed. Hale, his control slipping, lunged at Ruth, but Carl yanked him back, slamming him into his chair. "Don't test me," Carl warned, his radio crackling as backup arrived outside. Ruth stood tall, her voice rising. "You built this company on my father's dream, then poisoned it literally and figuratively. I cleaned your floors, but I also cleaned your clocks." She held up the second USB. "This one names names. Want to guess who's next?" The room was chaos, executives shouting over each other, some pleading, others threatening. Collins tried to call his lawyer, but Ruth snatched his phone, snapping it in half with a crack. "No calls," she said. "You face this now." The projector hummed, ready for the next blow. Lena, Jose, and Aisha stood behind Ruth, a quiet army of the overlooked, their eyes burning with years of pent-up rage. Ruth's heart pounded, but her face was stone. She'd waited too long for this, and she wasn't stopping until every lie was ash. The boardroom crackled with tension. The projector's hum, a heartbeat in the silence, as Ruth held the second USB like a dagger. Richard Hale slumped in his chair, defeated. But Ruth's gaze shifted to another man: Edward Grayson, the silver-haired director who'd sat on the board since her father's days. His calm facade, the way he sipped his coffee while others panicked, made her blood boil. "Edward," she said, her voice slicing the air. "You're next." Grayson's cup froze midair, his eyes narrowing, but he forced a chuckle. "Me, Ruth, you're grasping." The other executives turned, sensing a new target, their fear momentarily replaced by curiosity. Ruth clicked the USB into the projector, and Tim, the IT tech, scrambled to load it. The screen flared to life, showing a grainy security feed from 16 years ago. Marcus Hale, Ruth's father, clutching his chest in his office, collapsing as a shadowed figure slipped out. Gasps rippled through the room. Ruth's voice was ice. "That's you, Edward, the night you killed my father." The accusation hit like a bomb. Grayson shot to his feet, his chair crashing back. "This is slander," he roared, but his voice shook. betraying him. Ruth stepped closer, her boots thudding. You were his friend, his confidant, and you poisoned him to steal his company. She tossed a small, sealed vial onto the table, its label faded but legible arsenic. The room froze. Found it in your old office, hidden in a locked drawer. You kept it like a trophy. Grayson's face drained of color, his hands trembling as he backed toward the door. You can't prove anything, he spat. But Carl, the security guard, blocked his path, radio crackling with backup on the way. Ruth's eyes burned with years of grief. I was 20 when he died. I found him on that floor. Edward, you took him from me. Her voice cracked, but she steadied it, pointing at the screen. The video looped, zooming in on the figure's cufflink, a silver eagle, identical to the one Grayson wore now. The executives whispered, their loyalty to Grayson crumbling. Collins, desperate to deflect, stammered, Ruth, let's talk this out. But Ruth ignored him, her focus locked on Grayson. She pulled a folder from her stack, slamming it down. Lab reports, the coroner's original findings, buried by your bribes. Arsenic in his blood. Grayson lunged for the folder, but Lena, the fired receptionist, snatched it first, holding it high. Not today, Lena snapped, her voice fierce. Ruth nodded at her, then turned back to Grayson. You thought you'd won. You took his chair, his legacy, but I was watching. A flashback hit Ruth like a wave her, young and broken, sneaking into her father's office after hours, finding the vial in Grayson's drawer, her hands shaking as she hid it in her coat. She'd spent years piecing it together, late nights in libraries, bribing a retired coroner, tracking down the security tape through a disgraced PI. Every scrub of a floor, every emptied trash can had been a step toward this moment. The projector shifted to a new clip, Grayson, years later, boasting to a colleague in a bar about taking care of Marcus to secure his board seat. The audio was faint but clear, his laugh chilling. The boardroom erupted, executives shouting, some demanding Grayson explain, others edging away from him. Hale, sensing an opening, pointed at Grayson. If this is true, he acted alone. Ruth spun on him. Don't play innocent. Richard, you profited from his death. She tossed another document onto the table, board minutes from 2009, showing Hale's promotion after Marcus's death, signed by Grayson. The room was a pressure cooker, every accusation tightening the screws. Grayson, cornered, tried to bolt, shoving Carl aside, but Jose, the maintenance worker, tackled him, pinning him to the ground. You're not running, Jose growled, his own years of being dismissed fueling his strength. Aisha, the mailroom clerk, handed Ruth a taped phone call, her hand steady. This came last week. Aisha said. Ruth played it, Grayson's voice hissing through static. If Ruth's digging, we silence her. The threat hung heavy, but Ruth stood taller. You tried to scare me, she said, leaning over Grayson as he struggled under Jose's grip. But I'm not my father. I don't break. The door burst open and two more security guards stormed in, cuffs ready. Grayson thrashed, screaming about lawsuits. But the cuffs snapped on, the click echoing. Ruth turned to the executives, her voice rising. You all knew something. You let him sit here, poisoning this company, because it suited you. She tapped the vial. This ends now. The projector hummed, another clip ready, but Ruth paused, her eyes sweeping the room. Lena, Jose, Aisha, and Carl stood behind her, their faces hard with resolve. The invisible had become unstoppable. Grayson's cufflink glinted as he was dragged out, a symbol of his arrogance, now his downfall. Ruth's heart pounded, her father's memory a fire in her chest. She'd waited 16 years for this, and she was just getting started. The boardroom doors slammed shut behind Grayson's cuffed exit, the echo fading into a suffocating silence. Ruth stood at the table's head, her janitor's uniform a stark contrast to the executives' tailored suits. her eyes scanning their pale faces. Richard Hale, Collins, and Marlowe exchanged furtive glances, their panic morphing into something darker calculation. Ruth clutched the second USB, its weight a promise of more ruin, but she sensed the shift. These men weren't done fighting. "You think this is over?" Hale hissed, his voice low, venomous. "You're a fool, Ruth." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Try me." But deep down, she knew they'd strike back. And soon, hours later, in the dead of night, the Hale Financial Group's server room hummed with betrayal. A shadowy figure, hired hacker known only as Viper, slipped through a back entrance, bypassing security with a stolen keycard. Collins had made the call from a burner phone, his voice trembling but resolute. "Wipe everything. Her videos, her files, all of it." Viper's fingers flew across the keyboard, code scrolling like a storm, targeting Ruth's digital arsenal. Alarms blared in Ruth's apartment, a converted storage unit above a laundromat where she'd rigged a private server to monitor the company's network. Her laptop screen flashed red, intrusion alert screaming. "They're moving," she muttered, pulling on her jacket, her heart racing. She'd expected this men like Hale didn't surrender. Years of scrubbing floors had taught her their desperation, and she'd prepared. Ruth sped to the office, her beat-up sedan screeching into the parking lot. Inside, Viper's hack was unraveling her evidence, deleting video files, corrupting bank records. But Ruth had a trump card, a mirrored backup in a Swiss bank vault. Untouchable by their greasy hands, she burst into the server room, catching Viper mid-keystroke, his hood obscuring his face. "Step away," she barked, yanking a fire extinguisher from the wall, ready to swing. Viper spun, a knife glinting in his hand, but Ruth was faster, spraying foam into his face. He stumbled, cursing, and she tackled him, pinning his arm until the knife clattered free. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her knee on his chest. Viper spat, defiant. "You're dead, lady." Ruth zip-tied his wrists, her hands steady from years of tying trash bags. She dragged him to a chair, then plugged her own device into the server, countering his hack with a script she'd written months ago, her nights spent learning code in secret. The system stabilized, her files flickering back to life, but the attack wasn't over. In a downtown bar, Collins and Marlowe huddled with a tech mercenary, their voices hushed. "She's got backups," Collins whispered, sweat beading. "We need her out permanently." Marlowe nodded, slipping an envelope of cash across the table. "Make it look like an accident." Back at the office, Ruth's phone buzzed Lena, her voice frantic. "They're coming for you." "Ruth, I overheard Collins on a call." Ruth's jaw tightened. She hauled Viper to the security office, where Carl was waiting, his radio crackling. "Lock him up," she said, tossing Viper to Carl. "We've got bigger problems." Ruth raced to the boardroom, booting up the projector for a preemptive strike. She called an emergency video conference, patching in shareholders from London to Tokyo, their faces flickering on the screen. "They're trying to erase me," she said, her voice steady, "but I'm one step ahead." She played a new clip Collins and Marlowe in the bar, recorded by a bartender Ruth had tipped off years ago. The shareholders gasped as Collins's voice promised to end her. The room buzzed with outrage, demands for arrests ringing through the speakers. Collins, watching from his office, smashed his monitor, his plan crumbling. Ruth's counterhack finished, restoring her evidence, and she uploaded it to a public cloud, tagging regulators. "You can't hide now," she said into the conference call, her eyes blazing. The door burst open, Marlowe charging in with a hired thug, a pipe in hand. "You're done, Ruth," he roared. But Carl and Jose stormed in behind, tackling the thug to the ground. Marlowe froze, his bravado gone as Carl cuffed him. Ruth stood tall, the shareholders still watching. "This is my father's company," she said, her voice ringing. "And I'm not backing down." The screen showed her Swiss backup syncing, every file secure. Lena, Aisha, and Jose flanked her, their faces hard with loyalty. The shareholders voted on the spot Collins and Marlowe suspended, pending charges. Ruth's phone pinged. The regulators were en route. She looked at the executives' empty chairs, her heart pounding, but her resolve unbreakable. They tried to bury her, but she'd buried them first. The Harrington corporate tower loomed like a glass monolith above downtown Atlanta, its reflective surface slicing through clouds like a blade. Darius had never been on a private jet before. He'd never been greeted at an airport by men in suits holding tablets with his name. But that morning, after stepping into the customized Gulfstream, he was no longer just a mechanic. He was a candidate for something bigger, and every second of the trip, he felt like the world was watching. And it was. As he exited the elevator onto the 68th floor, he was met by a woman in a crisp gray suit and platinum hair pulled tight. "Mr. Darius James," she said with a professional nod. "I'm Elise, right this way. No small talk. No delay." She led him down a corridor that screamed money marble floors, abstract art, frosted glass panels with embedded tech that lit up as they walked by. The last door opened into a boardroom. Long table, 13 chairs, all occupied except the one at the far end. Men and women in tailored suits turned as he entered, their expressions unreadable. At the head sat a man with silver hair and a presence that filled the room even before he spoke. "Mr. James," the man said, "I'm Charles Harrington. Please, sit." Darius sat. The room went still. "You've impressed my daughter," Charles began, "and my security division, and my executive board, but I don't invest lightly. So let's get to the final step." He raised a hand. The lights dimmed. A holographic screen glowed to life in the center of the table. Footage played Darius fixing Maya's car, Darius handling the attackers, Darius lifting the hood of the Civic. Every moment had been recorded. "What you did," Charles said, "was rare, honest. But we don't just need honesty, we need leadership." The room shifted. A new voice piped in, this one from a man mid-table, sharp jawline, smug eyes. "With respect, sir, this man has no degree, no formal management background, no proven corporate experience. Are we really handing a multi-million-dollar rollout to a grease-stained outsider?" Darius didn't flinch. "That outsider just built trust with your clients without asking for a cent," he said coolly. "How many of your MBA hires can say that?" A few eyebrows lifted. The smug man's smirk tightened. "Then let's test that trust. Shall we?" Charles nodded. "We've arranged something, Elise." The woman stepped forward and handed Darius a tablet. On it, 6 client files, each with a name, a vehicle, and a coded situation. "You have 20 minutes to prioritize these 6 clients. One of them is a plant. One is a decoy. One is a high-risk legal liability. One is a VIP under disguise. 2 are legitimate but low value. Choose wrong and you'll cost us millions. Choose right, and I'm in," Darius said, already scrolling. Each case was a puzzle. A billionaire's daughter claiming battery failure, a retired pilot with engine smoke, a well-dressed woman with strange brake patterns. Darius read, reread, then tapped twice and slid the tablet across the table. "You're done," one executive asked. "In 9 minutes, that's 9 minutes too long for a real garage." Darius replied, "Prioritize the Bentley with the brake issue. That's not where that's sabotage. Then the record pilot, he knows engines. The others can wait or are lying. And that billionaire's daughter, she's the decoy. Rich kids always scream battery. It's usually the key fob." Silence. Charles nodded slowly. "He's right, on all counts." Elise smiled for the first time. The smug man leaned back, frowning. "Welcome aboard, Director James," Charles said. "Effective immediately, you'll oversee our Atlanta build-out. Staff selection starts tomorrow. First press conference in 72 hours. Wait," Darius said, "one thing. Yes, I want to bring my own crew. My people, the guys who got me here." Charles hesitated. "That can be negotiated." "No, Darius said, "That's the deal." Another silence. Then Charles smiled. "You've got guts. Fine, bring your crew. And one more thing," Darius added, "get me Maya." The room turned. "I want her on this rollout, not just as your daughter, as my partner." Charles's gaze narrowed. Then, after a beat, he gave a slow, firm nod. "Done." As Darius rose and turned to leave, the smug executive whispered, "You're in over your head. Mechanic." Darius paused at the door. "Then pray I don't learn to swim." And with that, the door slid shut behind him. The boardroom was a battlefield, its polished table littered with evidence ledgers, USB drives, a torn memo that had gutted Hale's empire. Ruth stood at its head, her janitor's uniform a badge of defiance, the will of Marcus Hale under her palm. Hale sat cuffed in a corner, his face a mask of fury, while the remaining executives shrank in their chairs, their power crumbling. Lena, Jose, Aisha, Maria, Malik, Sarah, and Carl flanked Ruth, their eyes burning with years of silenced rage. Regulators were en route, but Ruth wasn't waiting. She'd called an emergency shareholder meeting, and now screens flickered to life, beaming in investors from New York to Singapore. "This ends today," she declared, her voice steady, reverberating through the room and across continents. The shareholders' faces, some skeptical, others outraged, stared back, their murmurs crackling through the speakers. Ruth tapped her phone, streaming every damning file to their servers' videos of Hale's slurs, Grayson's murder plot, Collins's bribes, Marlowe's shredded documents. "This is what they did to my father's company, she said, pointing at Hale. "They stole, lied, killed. But I'm taking it back." A shareholder, a grizzled man from London named Baxter, cut in, his voice sharp. "You're a cleaner, Ms. Hale. Why should we trust you?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the call. Ruth's jaw tightened, but she'd prepared for this. She nodded at Aisha, who uploaded a presentation Ruth had crafted in stolen hours, her hands raw from mopping by day, typing by night. The slides outlined her planned transparency, reinvesting profits into staff, rooting out corruption. "My father built this for people, not greed," Ruth said. "I've seen every corner of this company. I know its heart." Some shareholders nodded, but a bloc loyal to Hale, led by a slick financier named Veronica Steele, pushed back. "Hale's deals kept us rich," Steele snapped, her voice dripping disdain. "You're nobody." The room tensed, the executives perking up, sensing an opening. Steele's allies flooded the chat with demands to reinstate Hale, their messages a digital roar. Ruth's team shifted, ready to fight, but she raised a hand, silencing them. "You want proof," she said, her voice ice. She played a new clip, Hale and Steele in a hotel suite, recorded by a waiter Ruth had tipped, discussing how to siphon shareholder dividends into their own accounts. Steele's face froze on the screen, her composure cracking. The shareholders erupted, Baxter shouting for her expulsion. But Steele wasn't done. "This is a coup," she screeched, slamming her desk, her allies echoing her. In the boardroom, one of Hale's loyalists, a board member named Travers, leaped up, his face red. "You're ruining us," he roared, charging at Ruth. Jose reacted instantly, tackling Travers to the ground, the impact shaking the table. Papers flew, a water glass shattered, and the room descended into chaos. Carl and Malik jumped in, pinning Travers as he thrashed, screaming about loyalty to Hale. "Enough," Ruth bellowed, her voice cutting through the din. The room stilled, even Travers pausing under Jose's grip. She turned to the screens, her eyes blazing. "You backed these thieves because it lined your pockets. But this company isn't yours, it's my father's. And mine." She uploaded the final piece, a 1990s video of Marcus Hale, young and fierce, pitching his vision of a fair, innovative firm. The shareholders fell silent, some visibly moved. Ruth seized the moment. "I'm not here to destroy," she said. "I'm here to rebuild. Vote with me, or lose everything when the SEC walks in." The threat landed hard. Baxter swayed, called for a vote. Steele tried to rally her bloc, but the tide was turning. Shareholders, spooked by the evidence and Ruth's resolve, began siding with her. Travers, still pinned, spat at Jose. "You'll pay for this? You nobody." Jose leaned in, his voice low. "I'm the nobody who's keeping you down." The room laughed, tension breaking for a moment. But the fight wasn't over. Steele, desperate, patched in a surprise guest Hale's lawyer, a shark named Kessler, who claimed Ruth Barrett's will was forged. The executives perked up, hope flickering. Ruth's heart raced, but she'd anticipated this. She tossed a notarized affidavit onto the table, signed by her father's old attorney, confirming the will's authenticity. "Check the blockchain," she said, revealing she'd logged it on a tamper-proof ledger years ago. Kessler stammered, so, caught off guard, and the shareholders' chat exploded with support for Ruth. The vote began, numbers ticking on the screen, 60% for Ruth, then 70%. Steele's block crumbled, her face ashen. Travers, seeing the loss, broke free from Jose, grabbing a letter opener from the table and lunging at Ruth. Lena screamed, but Ruth dodged, her reflexes honed from years of dodging spills and insults. Carl tackled Travers, wrenching the weapon free, cuffs snapping on. The shareholders, horrified, finalized the vote 85-3 for Ruth to take control. Hale and his allies stripped of power. The screens buzzed with applause, but Ruth stayed focused, her team rallying around her. "This is step one," she said, her voice firm. "We rebuild now, together." Lena handed her a list of loyal staff ready to step up, their names a testament to the invisible who'd carried the company. The boardroom doors swung open, regulators storming in, badges flashing. Ruth nodded at Carl, who led them to Hale. Her father's vision burned in her chest, and with her team behind her, she was unstoppable. The vote was hers, but the war wasn't won yet. The boardroom was a war zone, its air heavy with the scent of spilled coffee and shattered egos. Ruth stood at the helm, her janitor's uniform now a symbol of revolution. The will of Marcus Hale, her shield. Hale, cuffed and glowering, was escorted out by regulators, his empire reduced to ash. The remaining executives, Vickers, a few board holdouts, and a trembling CFO named Lang sat like cornered animals, their eyes darting to the screens where shareholders' votes still glowed, 85% for Ruth. Lena, Jose, Aisha, Maria, Malik, Sarah, and Carl stood behind her, their evidence ledgers, tapes, emails a mountain no one could deny. Ruth's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade. "You're done," she said, pointing at Vickers and Lang. "All of you, pack your desks." Vickers shot to his feet, his face purple. "You can't fire us. We built this company." Ruth stepped closer, her boots thudding. "You built nothing. You stole it." She tossed a termination letter onto the table, signed with her 51% authority. "You're out effective now." The room erupted, Lang slamming his laptop shut, Vickers cursing, but Carl and his security team moved in, radios crackling, ready to escort them. Ruth raised a hand, silencing the chaos. "And you're not leaving empty-handed," she said, her voice cold. "You'll face charges." She nodded at Aisha, who uploaded a final file to the regulators' proof of Lang's insider trading. Vickers' tax evasion. The executives froze, their defiance crumbling. But Lang wasn't going quietly. As security herded him toward the door, he slipped a USB into a boardroom terminal, his fingers flying across a hidden app. Alarms blared, screens flashing red system breach. Ruth's heart sank. "He's in the financials," she shouted, recognizing the sabotage. Lang was trying to crash the company's accounts, wipe pension funds, and tank the stock before he left. The room dissolved into pandemonium, executives scrambling, shareholders screaming through the screens. Ruth dove for the terminal, yanking out the USB, but the damage was spreading, transactions frozen, employee accounts locked. Timshi barked, and the IT tech sprinted to a console, his hands shaking as he fought the malware. "It's a worm," Tim stammered. "He's wiping everything." Ruth's mind raced. She'd spent years learning the company's systems, sneaking into server rooms after hours. But this was a gut punch. Lang smirked, halfway out the door. "You'll crash without me," he taunted. Ruth grabbed his arm, twisting it back, her strength honed from years of hauling trash. "You're not walking away," she growled, shoving him into Carl's grip. "Lock him down." Carl cuffed Lang, slamming him against the wall, but the worm was still eating through the system. Ruth turned to her team. "We stop this now." Sarah, the fired data clerk, stepped up, her voice steady. "I know the financial back end. I can help." Ruth nodded, trusting her. Sarah and Tim hunched over the console, their fingers a blur, countering the worm with a script Ruth had taught Sarah during late-night training sessions. Jose and Malik, meanwhile, barricaded the doors, blocking Vickers' attempt to slip out. "You're staying for this," Jose snapped, his fist clenched. The screens flickered, shareholder panic rising, but Ruth seized the moment. She patched into the call, her voice booming. "We're under attack, but we're fighting back. This is what they do, destroy what they can't control. Trust us." Her eyes locked on Lena, who was rallying the team, passing out laptops to Maria and Aisha. "Check the backups," Lena ordered. Her receptionist days replaced by leadership. Maria, the cafeteria cook, plugged in a drive, pulling up Ruth's Swiss Vault, a mirrored system Ruth had built in secret. "It's intact," Maria shouted, and the room exhaled. Ruth's foresight had saved them, but the worm was still active, locking employee pensions. Sarah's screen flashed a breakthrough. She'd isolated the worm's source code. "It's Lang's signature," she said, her voice fierce. "I can kill it." Ruth nodded. "Do it," Sarah typed, sweat beading, and the screen stabilized, accounts unlocking, pensions restored. The shareholders cheered, their faith in Ruth cemented. But Vickers, desperate, tried one last move. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, swinging it at Tim's console to destroy the evidence. Malik tackled him, the extinguisher crashing to the floor, foam spraying. "Not today." Malik growled, pinning Vickers as Carl cuffed him. The room was a whirlwind, but Ruth stood tall, her team a fortress around her. With the system secure, she turned to the shareholders. "This company needs new blood," she said, her voice ringing. She pointed at Lena, head of HR, at Jose, operations lead, at Aisha, compliance chief, at Sarah, CFO. The team gasped, their eyes wide, but Ruth pressed on. "They've proven themselves. They're the future." Maria, tears streaming, hugged at Ruth, her voice choked. "I just cooked lunches." Ruth smiled, rare and warm. "You fed us all." Now led, the shareholders moved, voted unanimously to approve the appointments, their applause crackling through the screens. Lena stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "I was fired for begging to keep my job. Now I'll make sure no one's ignored." The room roared, employees embracing their years of being stepped on erased in that moment. Ruth's phone buzzed, regulators hauling Lang and Vickers to holding, charges piling up. She looked at the boardroom, its old guard gone, her team rising. "We're not done," she said, her father's will in her hand, his dream alive. The worm was dead, the company saved. But Ruth knew the final fight loomed. Her team, now leaders, stood ready, their loyalty unbreakable. The boardroom was a quiet battlefield, its scars scattered papers, a cracked screen proof of Ruth's war. She stood at its center, her janitor's uniform now a banner of triumph. The will of Marcus Hale gripped tightly. The old guard Hale, Grayson, Collins, Marlowe, Vickers. Lang was gone, swept away by regulators or her relentless evidence. Lena, Jose, Aisha, Sarah, Maria, Malik, and Carl encircled her. No longer shadows, but leaders with titles HR chief, operations lead, compliance head, CFO, and more forged in loyalty and fire. The projector screens glowed with one message: Hail Financial Group, a new era. Shareholders, watching globally, had crowned Ruth with their votes. But she wasn't here to rest, she was here to rebuild. She stepped into the main office, a sea of cubicles where employees stood, their eyes wide with hope and doubt after years of betrayal. "This company belongs to you again," Ruth declared, her voice cutting through the hum of machines. "My father built it for you, and I'm giving it back." Cheers erupted, tentative at first, then thunderous. But Ruth raised a hand, her gaze fierce. "We begin with truth." She nodded at Aisha, who posted a report online: every sin of the old regime: embezzlement, racism, murder exposed. Employees gasped, scrolling through Hale's slurs, Grayson's poison, Lang's worm. No more lies. Ruth said, her boots echoing as she paced. No more fear. The office doors flew open and a crowd of fired workers, dozens, led by Tony, a warehouse driver, surged in, their faces raw with anger and hope. Tony waved a pink slip, his voice cracking. "You're rehiring us." Ruth met his eyes, steady. More than that, she unveiled a $50 million fund, clawed back from offshore accounts, to rehire every wrongfully fired worker, pay their back wages, and fund training. The room exploded, employees hugging, tears falling. Tony dropped his slip, embracing Ruth. "I thought we were worthless," he whispered. Ruth's voice softened, a rare warmth. "You're the heart of this place." But danger lingered. Alarm screamed security breach. Pierce, a board loyalist who'd slipped away, was hacking the payroll from a satellite office, siphoning the fund to his account. Ruth's phone buzzed. Tim's voice panicked. "He's stealing it all." Ruth sprinted to the control room, her team behind her. "Shut it down," she shouted, slamming into a console. Pierce's face smirked on a hacked feed. "You lose." "Ruth, this company's mine." Ruth's blood boiled. She'd scrubbed floors to learn every system, every flaw. "Wrong," she snapped, her fingers dancing across the keyboard, triggering a failsafe she'd coded in secret. The payroll froze. Pierce's transfer blocked. Sarah, now CFO, rerouted funds to a secure vault. "Nailed him," Sarah yelled, and the team roared. Pierce, desperate, locked down his office, his voice taunting. "You can't get in." Ruth turned to Carl. "Break it." Carl, Jose, and Malik grabbed crowbars and bolt cutters from maintenance, their years of fixing leaks now a weapon. They stormed the satellite office, smashing a steel door, alarms blaring. Pierce swung a chair, but Jose dodged, tackling him to the floor. "It's over," Jose growled, as Malik zip-tied his wrists. Carl hauled Pierce out, his smirk erased. Regulators waiting. Back in the office, Ruth climbed onto a desk, the crowd swelling, their faces alive. "I cleaned these floors for 15 years, she said, her voice rising. "Not to stay down, but to rise. I saw your struggle, your strength. Today, we clean hearts." She played a final video, a memory from her youth, Marcus Hale, laughing with workers, telling young Ruth, "A clean floor means a clean soul." The crowd roared, chanting her name. Ruth stepped down, her team beside her, and announced the fund's first project, a community center for laid-off workers, named after Marcus. Employees wept, their trust reborn. As dusk fell, Ruth walked out of the building, the city skyline shimmering. She glanced back, the cheers echoing, her father's dream alive. A flashback hit Marcus, tucking her in, whispering, "You're my legacy." She smiled, her heart full, and stepped forward. Her team's strength, her anchor. The company was hers, its soul cleansed at last. Ruth, a janitor, exposed a corrupt CEO, racism, and her father's murderer, reclaiming her legacy. Thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our latest videos. Join us for more gripping tales of justice and redemption.